Hey, I'm excited to have this show together because, I always love hearing from our guest. He's the mayor of Knox County in Tennessee and WWE Hall of Famer, Glenn Jacobs. How you doing?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I always got to bring in the wrestling element. I have a special place in my heart for that as well, of course. But it's so great to have you on because there's so many things that you've been talking about. Look, I remember, this is going way back, but I remember booking you on another person's show, Straight Talk with Jerry Hughes. He has a beautiful
Yeah.
baritone voice. Many years ago, I was a producer, and I remember, the things that you were talking about, the Federal Reserve and foreign aid and wastefulness, just like a lot of other pioneers in the news, like Ron Paul. You were one of those guys out there talking about these things before they were cool, and now they're very much the biggest thing everybody's talking about. So, how does it feel, first of all, this moment after this big win with Trump, and then what's happening with Doge?
It's almost surreal to see what's happening in Washington, D.C. For the longest time, I thought that unfortunately Washington was just a lost cause. It was perpetually broken. And now it's like, oh my goodness, all these things are happening that can really have a huge beneficial impact on the quality of lives for Americans for generations to come. I mean, this is all transformational. So on the one hand, you want to say you're vindicated, but at the same time, these are still ongoing issues and problems, and there's
Yeah.
just way too much spending in Washington. And unfortunately, as we've seen, the swamp is even deeper, I think, than any of us thought.
Yeah.
And the corruption goes further than any of us would have thought beforehand. And this is coming from someone who's pretty skeptical and jaded about the federal government.
Yeah.
So the fact that I'm surprised by some of this stuff really tells you something.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done. But for me, it's really, it's really rewarding and encouraging that the work is finally being done, and at least we're starting to talk about some of these really foundational issues. The Federal Reserve. You talk about spending. That's the Federal Reserve is what makes this spending possible. It's what makes all this debt possible. And the fact that we're finally talking about that and floating the idea of Ron Paul to audit the Fed or to be the Fed chair. Dude, it's like I went to heaven now,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that would be the ultimate.
The
So it's
Overton window, the vaunted Overton window, has
ooh,
been
it
blown
it
out of the.
it has shifted, yeah. But it's wonderful because again, these are just to me, these are issues that really,
Right.
when we look at all the other problems, those are symptoms. But some of these things, the Fed, what happened with USAID and some of these other things, those are the actual problem. And the more that we can talk about those, the better.
It's interesting. It's true that there's this sense that when you really look at it, the financialization of the economy really is the first mover for change, and then politics is a lagging indicator. And you can see there's a lot of things. I don't know if you know Tom Luongo, but he's a fascinating economic analyst, and he has been talking about some of the things that have happened in recent years under Powell, where it seems like there's a bit of a war between the Federal Reserve and the European central banks and the Bank of England. And perhaps this fiscal reckoning that's taking place is almost kind of coming alongside as a lagging indicator for what's been going on behind the scenes in these kind of shadowy worlds of high finance and central banks. Have you looked
Sure.
at that?
And you can see that with
Yeah,
adversarial countries as well. And Trump is very attuned to this,
yeah,
the movement away from the dollar,
right.
China and Russia attempting to basically create a regional reserve currencies, and that's all to chip away at the dollar status as the world's reserve currency.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's funny because as you say, it's kind of the dark halls of finance that we don't think about. But so many times that is what drives everything else.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we live in a world of scarcity, and we have this idea that since the Fed can print money, that kind of overcomes it. However, scarcity is always always there. I mean, that's the basis for economics. And at some point, that reality makes itself known again. And that even goes for power as well. You know, power is a zero-sum game generally. If one person has it or one country has it, it's at the expense of other countries, and they're always trying to get it
Yeah.
themselves. And again, you're exactly right. We often don't see these things play out
Yeah.
in public, but we can see the results of them coming out in public or some of the byproducts.
And people who love liberty and are skeptical of the state in general, there's always been an ongoing debate amongst the purists versus the pragmatists. And that's been a perennial debate for any kind of philosophy that wants to change
Yeah.
things. But you really see that debate really spilling out in real time and people really kind of rethinking just how purist they want to be. Because, you can always speculate in theory about the foundations of this or that. But like I say, look, EMS is government funding. And if you've got an emergency and you're bleeding out, you're not going to say, excuse me, I object to this ambulance. I'm bleeding, but I have merely a head wound. I will take the car and drive. No, you just take the ambulance, So always having this kind of purity, it works as a mental abstraction. But we don't want to denigrate that. There are real principles that should always be pursued, but it has to be in tension with where we are. And that's kind of what's playing out with this MAGA coalition that's doing the biggest libertarian moment we've ever
Yeah.
seen in history.
Right. It is. It is. And, who'd have ever thought that it was Donald Trump that has caused all this to happen?
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. And that's something that, that I struggle with to some extent, obviously, because, I would consider myself an ideologue. I'm a purist on many areas. That's not the world we live in. It's just not. I mean, today, actually had a luncheon where the ambassador, the Australian ambassador to the U.S. Was at the University of Tennessee. He's also former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, and he's an expert on China. And everything that's China is doing is literally trying to corner the world market on whether it's lithium or uranium or rare earth minerals. And it's not a market anymore because they have basically, they're not playing by the same rules. So you're left with this quandary of, F.A. Hayek in The Road to Serfdom wrote, you don't want to become what you're fighting. At the same time, you do have to take measures that are really extraordinary. And Trump's done this. Normally, I would be completely opposed to executive orders, but you see the way that he's using them. And in many cases, what he's doing is rolling back other executive orders by former presidents and implementing his own. But at some point, it does become just fighting fire with fire. That's what you have to do.
Because
It'd be completely different if we were in this, this great utopia that we want to live in, but we're not. And that's actually, as an elected official, that's the hardest thing for me is, there's been a lot of books written about this, the utopia. This is what we want, but there hasn't been much about how do we actually get there in a practical
even the great Robert Murphy, who's a brilliant economist, and I'm sure you know him. And I saw him say something recently where he said something to the effect of people making all this hubbub about his executive orders to repeal some of this corrupt USAID and all this. And he said, at what point do we lose the plot? If the president discovers there's real evil criminality going on, and he's using an executive order to stop it, how is that a violation of the NAP or non-aggression principle for folks who are not into that?
And Jeffrey Tucker's been writing the same thing. Jeffrey's head of the Brownstone Institute, as libertarian as you can possibly be, but he's been defending much of what Trump has done for that very reason. This is just the practical world that we live in, and how do we operate in that and move in the direction that we need to move in, want to move in.
I mean, and being an absolutist, I mean, like you say, it can get you in a quandary because much of the, the executive branch is, unconstitutional creations of Congress as a way to delegate their authority to unelected bureaucrats. So in some sense, it's not necessarily unconstitutional to start using the actual constitutional authority of the president
to rein back in.
Exactly. To reclaim some sanity, right? I mean, how else would this actually go about? You know what I mean?
And one of the things that's really distressing to me is now you have these judges coming out and, offering injunctions or ordering injunctions about some of the things that Trump's doing. It's like, wait a second, these are purely functions of the executive branch.
Mhm.
Okay, how do you have a judge come in
Yeah.
and say that, for instance, the Treasury Secretary cannot have access
Yeah.
to data within the Treasury system?
Yeah.
Okay, that again, you talk about judicial activism and overriding the Constitution. That judge has, to me, has no standing whatsoever to
Right.
make that order because this is an executive branch decision. It's carried out by the executive branch. The judicial branch has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. So out of all the whirlwind of changes happening, what are you most excited about, or what have you been most thrilled with, or just riveted by with all the different things flooding the zone every day from Trump?
Obviously,
Yeah.
Doge. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just it
Yeah.
because they're following the money,
Yeah.
and when you follow the money, that's when you find out the
The
truth.
fireworks, right?
Exactly. And, so many of the things that they've uncovered, whether it's USAID, whether it's the National Institute of Health wants to build a monument to Anthony Fauci, $168,000, which is obviously a rounding error in the federal budget. I don't care. Get rid of that thing, right? So it's amazing just to see the work that they've done in bringing so many of these things to the forefront and saving money really in an actual significant way, not just talking about it. And that's what's been the most amazing thing to me actually about the second Trump administration. It almost feels like when he went in office in 2016, he was probably a little surprised that he won.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they had a great plan moving forward. Brother, he learned from that. And this
Yeah.
time they had a plan coming in and they have executed it like no president in history. And I'm telling you, if Ron Paul gets to audit the Federal Reserve, that's it. Donald Trump is the greatest president ever.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
He's done this first 3 weeks have been amazing. He has
Yeah.
done more good things in 3 weeks than almost every other president has done over their
He made them
entire
look so
term.
sleepy and useless.
Yeah, I mean,
These
it's
other
just
presidents.
it's just amazing. And as you said, they're literally libertarian reforms that he has been able to implement that just most of us probably thought would never happen. And
Yeah.
then here it is happening. It's just been amazing. I mean, I just applaud. It's been remarkable what they've been able to do.
Yeah, I mean, and my show played a historically significant role in making this Elon Musk Ron Paul alliance happen. It was a God thing, providentially, right before the Tuesday election. I brought him on to Halloween, and I had never heard anybody ask him or even come up with the idea about could you work with DOGE with Elon, and I said, let me ask him, and he said, well, in his humble self, oh, I'm not interested in doing anything official, but if they ask, maybe. And I said, I think we just broke a little news there, and the
Yeah,
world went nuts with that when we blast that out there, and then Elon's sending memes, and he's been sharing almost every show every week. Ron Paul's latest column
yeah,
about foreign policy, neocons, everything, and to see it now culminate to the point where he could be, because Elon, for those who didn't see, has said two or three times, not only should Ron run the audit for the DOGE for the Federal Reserve, but maybe even be the chairman. Now,
yeah.
well, I don't think Ron would be interested in being the chairman, but
He would not.
this
I
is a
agree with you.
symbolic victory. You know what I mean? This is a
Yeah.
symbolic victory, and Charlie Kirk's on board, and Senator Mike Lee, and you know,
And
I'm selfish. I want to see Senator Glenn Jacobs in there too one day. I don't know. That's just
well,
me. That's just me. I'm speaking out of turn, but we need to get all these guys in here and really expose the whole rot and do a great reset on all this nonsense, huh? Let's take their
the,
word. Great
yeah,
reset on this
the good
nonsense.
great reset, exactly. A good one. And one of the most important things that's actually happened in the 21st century is Elon Musk buying Twitter.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. And then what he has done, and you think about it, you see former Democrats like Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, stood up for Bernie Sanders when he basically got the shaft
Yeah.
because of the Hillary Clinton when he's running for president against Hillary Clinton. And then he doesn't vote for her to confirm her, right? And obviously, and I put on Twitter today, I was like, you learn who the establishment is when the establishment is threatened. And Bernie's as establishment as anybody. But you think about Elon Musk,
Yeah.
guy that comes probably center left. I wouldn't say he
Yeah.
was ever
Yeah.
hardcore, lib or anything like that. It's amazing. And he is, he's putting stuff out from Thomas Sowell, like you said, from Rand Paul, from the Austrian economists,
Yeah.
from
Milton
Milton
Friedman. Yeah.
Friedman.
Yeah.
It is unbelievable. And the impact that he has had,
Yeah.
and he's also, I have to say, he's also a master troll. I mean, the fact that he's just driving the media nuts and shows them for what they are as well, which is basically the mainstream media is a bunch of clowns.
Yeah.
And he has them on a string and is playing them like puppets. It is glorious, actually. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's fantastic. You mentioned Bernie. I have to remind for those who didn't know this. Remember when Ron Paul he got the audit the Fed bill passed
Yeah.
in the House? It goes to the Senate, and Bernie was supposed to be his guy in the Senate. And at the last minute, the bankers put pressure on Bernie, and he gutted. He took all the
Yep.
teeth out of that audit the Fed, and the bill that Obama or whatever signed in was a toothless audit that never did anything.
Well,
So
Bernie,
that's Bernie
Bernie,
for you in a
he
nutshell.
talks the talk, man, but he doesn't walk the walk.
Hey, maybe there's something, maybe that's a proof of the collectivist spirit versus the individual spirit, when you actually stand up for yourself and think for yourself versus I got to be a company man. Chuck Schumer says he's got something for me. When you have
Yeah.
that company man attitude, sometimes you don't do the right thing. You got to do the right thing, even when it means you're going to take suffering, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what
You
you,
have to be Mike Lee. You have to be Rand Paul.
yeah. So let's talk about you for a second, because I kind of see you and what I think I've seen you posting on about Doge on X and stuff, but I've always kind of seen you as a one man Doge at the county level where you're at as the mayor with what you can do within the purview of your office. Um, so I want to know, what there's a lot of people listening right now who are like, well, that's really awesome what's going on at the federal level, but that's a little bit too big for me to be a part of. What could I do at the city or the county or my local state level to put a Doge type effort in place? So I would want to know what you would say to that. You've done it, so tell me.
Well, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
I inherited a good situation. My predecessor is Congressman Tim Burchett,
yeah,
and obviously he's a very fiscally conservative
yeah,
individual. It was kind of actually it was almost a two-edged sword for me because normally I would have come in and just started cutting stuff.
yeah,
Uh, Tim had done such a great job. There wasn't really a whole lot to cut. So we've made some adjustments here or there. But again, I inherited a good situation. There are other places around the country. It comes to mind Chicago. Chicago's got a $25.5 billion pension problem. They're
right,
$25.5 billion underwater in their pension. You look at Los Angeles and everything that they just went through. Los Angeles has a 15-member city council. Every person on that city council receives compensation of about $225,000 a year. They're the highest paid local, commission in
yeah,
the country. And I think they also have a full staff. Well, I think a third of the Los Angeles City Council has either been indicted or convicted of corruption. Okay, so apparently $225,000 isn't enough to live on, which probably is about the case in Los Angeles.
yeah,
But you just look around the country and it's amazing. Here in Knox County, the things that I see go on other places. I mean, just I can't even imagine that happening
yeah,
here because people hold us, I think, to a much higher level maybe than they do other places,
yeah,
and that's true. Obviously, that's not just Knox County; that's true around the country.
yeah.
But I think that more there are a lot of places that certainly could use some auditing and a closer look at what they actually do. And I
four
think
hundred
the
dollar
people,
toothbrushes and stuff. That's what I
right,
want to
right,
find.
right. Or Brandon Johnson in Chicago has got a room that's off limits to his inspector general, where they keep all the gifts apparently that he's
Uh-oh.
received, including cufflinks and Gucci bags. So some of these things, it's not even. I don't even call it low hanging fruit. It's just ridiculous, and
What would you
it
say to
should
a
be taken
local
care of.
what would you say to a local activist who's like, I don't know much about my city government or my county government, but I want a Doge in my local, I want to start this. Do I got, and I know everybody's got different
Yeah,
charters and ordinances and so
sure.
forth, but what would you just generally recommend to the
Just
audience?
educate yourself
Yeah.
about, like a lot of folks think that I'm the dictator of Knox County and I can just do this or do that, and I can't.
Yeah.
My power as mayor is actually severely limited, probably compared to even a city mayor in many cases.
Okay.
But people still think that, oh, I can make this happen. I can't make this happen, and that just comes down to not understanding. And I get it. Most people are not going to get that in the weeds with local
Yeah.
government. However, I would say that your local government has as much, if not greater, impact on your quality of life than the federal government does.
Yeah.
Even today, most of the services that we think about government, roads, police, EMS, and so forth, schools, those are provided by the state and local government, not the federal government.
And I saw,
So,
yeah.
and it also, when you have good state government, good local government, um, that really sets you apart from other places. Here in Tennessee, we're seeing an influx of people from blue areas, and the reason is not because they're liberals, just coming here to change our way of life. It's because they're folks that are tired of the foolishness that goes on in so
Yeah.
many other places. So yeah, learn as much as you can about your local government, and also, be supportive of the good people in elected office. All too often, what happens is we yell at folks for stuff, but then we don't praise the people that do the right thing.
Yeah.
And what happens is you kind of end up feeling alone because you're like, I'm doing the right thing, and no one's saying anything about that.
Yeah.
So that can be just as important as holding people's feet to the fire, and
Yeah.
build relationships with your local elected officials as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Representative Tim Burchett. I can't wait to see him audit Area 51 with
I
DOGE.
know.
My goodness.
Well, yeah, and
Oh,
that's another, the way that Tim has gone about what he's done with the UAP and UFO stuff. People think, oh, it's Burchett talking about the little green men and flying saucers. No, if you actually listen to what he's saying, he's talking about transparency.
mm,
And if the government's hiding this from us, what else are they hiding from us?
no,
Congressman Burchett, he helps fund the Department of Defense, right?
no,
I mean, that's Congress's job to pass those funding bills. And he was told that he can't see these files because it wasn't even a clearance issue. He just couldn't see the files. The dude authorizes the check,
mm,
but he can't provide any oversight.
mm,
That's a problem with our system. And
yeah.
that's just endemic through not only the Department of Defense, but also so many other federal agencies.
Well, Glenn, if that leads to a trade war with Mars, we're going to have some trouble, though.
Yeah, we got Elon on our side, man. We'd be okay.
Yeah. But I mean, Anna Paulina Luna, who I've had on my show many times, she's been very steadfast on this issue too. And I have to say, I mean, if whatever's going on with that technology, we should know what it is. The public should
Yes.
have access to it and should be able
Yeah.
to reap the benefits of it. If the government has something that could revolutionize clean, you want to talk about clean, by the way, you don't hear about climate change as much lately. That trend kind of fell off the cliff a little bit, but regardless, if you want the planet to be clean and healthy, I mean, if these things that they're describing sounds like they don't have much pollution, whatever's going on, and if it's some genius Nikola Tesla in a basement putting these together for the government, we need to know about it. If it's whatever, it
Yeah.
needs to be known. So
Ultimately, how can you say that we're a government of, by, and for the people when the people never know what's going on?
yeah, yeah,
And I mean, from the origins of COVID-19 to this to so many other issues, we're just kept in the dark.
yeah.
And we're supposed to be an informed citizenry so that we can make decisions about who we send to office. And in many cases, though, that information we're not allowed to see it, and that frankly is wrong.
Well, Mayor Jacobs, it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I got to ask, what's next for you? I know that you've got a lot of great activities going on with your mayorship in Knox County. And if there's anything you'd like to highlight for folks that are probably listening, maybe some of them from in Knox County watching this show, you can highlight, whatever you guys have got going on over there, or anything else you'd like to share with this last closing time.
Yeah, so we just launched our this year's Read City USA challenge. You can go to readcityusa.com and learn more about that program. But basically, it's a community effort to get especially young people reading more.
Yeah.
We're also having a lot of success with our Skilled Trades Academy. There we have dual enrollment opportunities now through a couple of our high schools, so we're really happy about that. Tennessee is going to be the leader in nuclear energy. We're only about half an hour away from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is the world's foremost research and development lab. A French company called Orano just made a massive investment in that area, largest in the state's history, to build the first uranium enrichment facility in the United States in 19 years. So again, thinking about clean energy, ultimately that clean energy is nuclear. And I think that we can be a leader in that area. So the governor's on board with that. So there's some really exciting things happening here in East Tennessee.
Wow, what that could do, I mean, to revolutionize the economy even further.
Yeah.
It really feels like we're really having what we would call an apocalyptic moment. And I use that word, that word in its original Greek means to unveil things that were hidden. And it feels like we're in an unveiling moment for the last 100 years of governance, starting with Woodrow Wilson, and it couldn't happen
it's almost like
sooner.
we're repealing the progressive era. It almost feels
Yeah,
like,
and
right?
and now we have these green shoots of change and growth, like what you're talking about with the future nuclear energy industry that's safe and going to be amazing when we get our hands and our heads around it and not have all this politicization ruining and stealing from the people, you know. And I think, like you've said, we've only touched the tip of the iceberg here.
Yeah.
And when we get that Pentagon audit and it's good, it's great.
Well, I really do think it's just amazing how things can change in a very short period of time. If Kamala Harris had won the election, we would not certainly be in the situation that we are here now. But it just feels like a transformational moment for us. And it also feels, if things keep going like they are, obviously at some point you lose some momentum and all that sort of stuff. Again, you have forces such as activist judges, unfortunately, a lot of folks on the left that don't want to see this transformation happen. But if we can keep it going, I think that America's best days truly are ahead of her.
Yes, that's true. And hey, thank you for what you're doing, because you were early in terms of cultural figures before you got into politics and really pushing these ideas for liberty. And I know that you've influenced a lot of folks who are thrilled to see the audit of the Fed near being a reality. You've been pushing these ideas for many years like I said, when it wasn't popular, when people were looking at you cross-eyed when you mentioned these things. And so I appreciate you doing that, because you don't have to. You didn't have to. I mean, you had a very successful career, and just like Trump, you could have just kept on serving your own interests, but you decided to do the right thing. So I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's actually my pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we'll see you soon, and look forward to more exciting breaking news and audits to talk about in the near future.
Sounds good, David. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Take care.